Hello, this is King Rex coming at you with a Monopoly strategy video. This one is based on how to best use each of the property groups and which property groups are better than the other ones. We're going to go around the board first with the color groups. The first one we're going to come to is the brown group. The good thing about the brown group is they're very cheap to build, and they do give a good return per hit, meaning that you get your money back quickly after one or two hits. If they're hit twice, you'll have your money back. Honestly, if Baltic Avenue City, you have most of it back right there. The negatives of these groups are that they're the least landed on group in the game, even less than the utilities, at only 24% chance per circuit around the board. So they do have a low payback percentage compared to the other groups. So that's one thing you have to remember. They are not hit very often. The best usage of these, actually one thing I should tell you, do not think of this property group that's the same as any of the other property groups for the very big reason that they cannot win the game by themselves. Any property group outside of this group, the utilities and railroads, can win the game. This one cannot, not by itself. They just don't have the knockout potential. So you should really think of this as a group that's kind of like the railroads. It's your earning potential with hotels. If you look about one of every four hits and an average of $350 rent, you're going to get around 80 to 90 bucks on average every time someone comes around the board on these. Four railroads would get you around $130. So this is not as powerful as four railroads, but it's still more powerful than three railroads. So think of it along the lines of railroads more than like another property group that's got a color group. These are good for generating cash. I mean, with hotels, you get $90 on average every time someone goes to the board. Granted, you're not going to get it every time it's when they hit them, but so they'll generate good cash, especially to build bigger groups. And they also can be used very well as in creating housing shortages because you can put 8 houses on them. There's only 32 houses in the game, so that's about, you can put 1/4 of the houses on this property group. So if you have this group in a 3-title group, you could put 20 houses out and create a major housing shortage. That's really their thing. Generate cash, possibly create a housing shortage. The next group we're going to go to is the light blue group. This group does have the potential to win the game by itself, but generally the games that this is strong in are games where there's not a lot of money, so you're going to not want, this is why you don't want to have any house rules, because house rules put more money in the game, and this group is pretty much destroyed by that. Also, games where there's only 2 or 3 players, they shine in because there's only a lot less starting cash, or there's less money in the game to begin with. And you generally want to get these things built up early because you want to inhibit anyone else from building a more powerful group. They do have one big advantage to them. They do have the second best return on investment. If you build them to hotels, you'll get your money back more quickly with this group than any other group but the orange. But the problem is they don't generate very big rents. Even the max is 600, 550, 550 with hotels. If you go down to 4 houses to create a housing market shortage, 450, 400, 400, and below that, 300 and 270 to mark super big rents. So you almost have to go 4 houses on this group to really make them viable. Most other groups you only have to go 3 as far as being something that's going to inhibit your opponents, because you're not going to get hit about 39% of the time. That's the lowest of any group that's got 3 properties in it. So they don't get hit very often. They have a knockout potential, but not a big knockout potential. But they can create housing shortages, and once again, this group is an ideal group to generate cash to build on a second group. So you had these guys in either the green or the yellow. You can take the money that you're making off of this group, especially if that's in a 4-house group or 450, 400. You can actually build 2 houses every time this is hit on a green property. So they're good for that. And they also can help you stay in the game because after they're hit a few times, you can take a hit somewhere else every once in a while. We're going to go to the group that is the pink group, or they're sometimes called the light purple. The deeds I got pictured here are kind of between pink and light purple, but I've seen deeds that look 100% pink and deeds that don't look pink at all. They look just light purple. Um, so if you're pink or light purple, these are the properties that we're talking about. They're still relatively cheap to build, nowhere near as cheap as the light blue. But you look at 3 houses, they're going to pull better rents than the light blue with 4 houses, and then these with 4 houses definitely outshine the light blue. So you want to get them up to 3 houses pretty quickly. Where the light blue, you generally want to go to 4. So that's $900. The light blues would be $600 to get to that 4 house range. They are a little heavier to build, but they have better potential. They have more knockout potential. They're landed on 43% of the time, so they're landed on more. They don't have as good a payback potential as the light blue, but they're better for actually winning the game. The light blue will not be able to hang with other properties once they start getting 2 and 3 houses on them. These guys really are good until you start getting 3 houses or more on the other ones. This is a group that actually, believe it or not, people win the Monopoly championships with, but they tend to get this group without having to make a deal to get all 3 titles. They get it naturally by landing on each property. For some reason, this group seems to be the one that happens with the most, at least on championship levels. So the good thing about this group, they can still be a good cash generator if you have something heavier around the board. They have knockout potential, but the problem is they're kind of halfway between the light blues and the oranges. And so they're I place them as the 4th best Monopoly overall because they're still not too expensive to build and they can be good in most games. They still have a good chance of beating the light blue in a low cash game, and unless you get into a game where there's a lot of money flowing, they'll probably be able to restrict heavy properties like the greens or dark blues from getting built up. Also, this group is different to most other groups. When building houses, the general rule of thumb you want to do is you always want to put the first house on the most expensive premier property. The second house should go on the property that's the closest to free parking. But this group's kind of reversed because St. Charles Place is the most landed on property. So you'd want to put the extra. So if you're building, say, 2 houses is all you could afford, you put the first on Virginia and then the second on St. Charles. So if you're going 5 houses, it'd be 1, 1, 1. Second Virginia, extra 1 on Virginia, then on St. Charles. Otherwise, you want your secondary property to be the one closest to free parking. This is because there's a card that sends you to St. Charles. And for some odd reason, St. Charles Place seems to get landed on a lot just otherwise, too. It is actually one of these other 2 don't get landed on very often. St. Charles gets landed on above average. The oranges, this is the group that is deemed the best group in the game by just about every Monopoly expert. The reasons why are, number 1, it's landed on the most. It's hit 50% of the time each time you go around the board. Meaning, if you have this one built up, your opponents will start hitting it. If they don't, you may have a game where they get lucky and skate past it for a while, but eventually they're just going to start hitting this, and when they do, they'll be in trouble, especially if you can get this up to the 4 house or hotel range. Even at 3 houses, they got good knockout potential. If you get to hotels, that $1,000 is a lot. This has almost the same knockout potential as the reds or the yellows that cost more to build. That's everything. They're cheap to build, landed on the most. They have the best return on investment. Basically, return on investment is based on cost to build and the amount of times they get hit, plus the amount of rents they get. If you get the orange, I would say you have a very good chance of winning the game you're in. I've never lost with the orange, and I've never seen anybody lose a game where they had the orange, except for a few online ones. But it was situations where someone got the orange late because they bankrupted someone, because the person hit them secondary. Like they hit the first person, knocked them way down, and when they hit the next person, they bankrupted and that person. And they give the orange over, but that person wasn't in position to really build them. If you get the orange, you can build them, you'll probably win. If you can get into 3 houses, chances of you losing, I'd say, are very low at that point. Next, we're moving on to the reds. The reds are The next best group, the disadvantage they have over the orange is they just cost a lot more to build. The total cost of the orange properties with hotels is $2,060. The reds is $2,930. So that extra cost can be a lot harder to come by. Remember, at the beginning of the game, you start with $1,500. So in the orange, to build them all the way to potential, if you pass go 5 times and don't lose a lot of money otherwise, that money's sitting in your hand. So the reds are expensive to build, but they are landed on 49% of the time, and they do collect better rents, but not too much better. 1,100 and 1,050 are almost only $100 more. They do have a bit more potential, I think, with 4 houses to 4 houses. But even at 3 houses, 750 and 700, that's knockout potential right there. That's pretty good in the game. If you're not going to knock someone out with that, you're going to generally injure them to the point that they shouldn't be able to come back, especially if you're playing without house rules, so you don't have the extra money flying into the game. So I like these ones because they get hit a lot. They generate knockout potential rents. This is the second best one because they have to, even though they don't have quite as much knockout potential as the later properties, are landed on enough more. Plus, the property that's landed on the most in the game is Illinois Avenue. If you have an $1,100 rent on Illinois Avenue, that will either cripple or knock out most players. After the reds come the yellows. The yellows would look seemingly better than the reds on the surface because they do not cost hardly any more money. It's only $120 more to buy these total and put the houses or hotels up on them. They collect better rents. Look at about $100 more per, at least with the hotels. So they collect better rents. But the problem is they're only up 45% of the time compared to that 49. Plus, Marvin Gardens is the least hit property in this group compared to the Reds' most hit Illinois Avenue. So that does make the Reds a little bit better. But if you can't get the orange, you want to try to get the red. If you can't get the red, you want to get the yellow. Most games, if you do that, if you can get the yellow and no one else has the other two, you should win. Yellow versus red would probably be a pretty good game, or red versus orange. I think that'd be a close game if everything else is equal, but the red are a little bit better. They're much more likely to get hit because 2 rules out of jail, you're probably landing on a red. 1 rule, you're going to most likely land on an orange. 2nd rule, you're most likely going to land on a yellow. But many times you can skip, a red, many times you can skip past the yellow coming out of jail. So they're still really good, but not quite as good. So the best way to remember which property groups you should own, however, is very simply the hot colors, orange, red, and yellow, and they're right around the board in that order, or the order to own property groups. Beyond that, you may have to look situationally, but you can win with any group except for the brown. You might just have to play them differently. The yellows and reds, the way to play these is to kind of build slowly and get your money up. If you can get them to 2 houses, even 1 house, 120, 110, that's close to getting another house. If you get them to 2 houses, though, every time they're hit, you can buy another 2 houses. Just build them slowly. Try to get to this 3-house situation, and you should be able to at least have a chance of winning the game. If you have the yellows and no one else has the reds or the oranges, build them slowly. Same thing for the reds. Build them slowly. If you can get another money generator like a railroad, the Browns, or the utilities, it certainly helps. Build them slowly. Try to keep a few $100 on hand. Remember that the way I like to build, and some people go beyond this, is unless you really have to go all out, build with your cash, mortgage to pay rents if you have to. That's how I go about it. This is a property that you want to build slowly. Although the next group, the green, are the property you really have to build slowly. These are expensive, the most expensive group to build to full potential. The disadvantage these have, in my opinion, is that these rents aren't really a whole lot more than the yellows, but for some reason, this 1400 is more in line with Park Place than it is with the other greens. The thing with these, though, 3 houses, you're looking at 1,000, 900, 900, so they do generate good income with less houses than other properties. Also, even with two houses, you're looking 450 and 390. That would compare to the light blue with four houses and the pinks with three houses. So you don't have to go all the way up to hotels with these guys usually. If you really just want to put a big knockout punch, I would just go to four houses with these at most. I really wouldn't go beyond this four house range unless I really needed that knockout potential. Or I was fighting against someone who already had hotels on their reds or the yellows, then maybe I'd go there too, so mine generates a little bit more. These actually are landed on it for where they're at. They're not between jail and go to jail, which is usually the area where properties are landed on 44% of the time, so only 1% less than the yellows and 1% more than the pink. So the landing on, they're kind of middle of the road for property groups, but they do cost a lot to build, and that's why people don't like them. But if the money's out there, you can build them. These are especially good if you can pair them with three or four railroads or the brown group, because those groups will give you money. If you have four railroads, every time a railroad's hit, that's enough money to buy another house on one of these. So these are really good if you can have the four railroads and these. You should have a good chance in the game. But if you have these and nothing else that's really generating cash, it can be tough going to get these going. But once you get these built up to three houses, you should really have the potential to win the game. It might just come down to luck at that point. The last color group is the dark blue. Most people think this is the best group in the game, and they're wrong. They're not bad, but they're not great for a few reasons. Number one, they're only hit 27% of the time, second lowest next to the brown. They are expensive to build, not as expensive to build as the green, which only have two places that you can collect rents from. They still cost more than to build. It costs almost as much to build as the red or the yellow, $27.50. But once again, only two spots to build. The way I would actually build these would be to, number one, you don't need to go to hotels. I mean, look at the rent potentials at three houses even. Even two houses, they pack a pretty decent wall up at $600 and $500. But what I would do would generally try to put an extra house on Boardwalk. Park Place is the third least property in the game. Boardwalk's right in the middle at 15th out of 28 properties. So even though you forego rent if you get hit on Park Place, I'd probably go one extra house on Boardwalk. So if you can go three on Boardwalk, you get $1,400 and then just go two on Park Place. But if you have the money, definitely put it in them and build them up. That advance the Boardwalk card. If someone hits Boardwalk and it's at $2,000, they're probably finished. I would probably never put more than four houses on Park Place. However, that $1,300 is plenty. And if I could see going house to house up to three houses, but once you're past three houses, stay one house behind on Park Place. It doesn't get hit. At three houses, you're still getting $1,100, which is a very good rent. And you could go 1,100 to 1,700, 1,300 to 2,000. That's the way I would build them. But 1,400 on Boardwalk is actually as much as Pennsylvania Avenue, which is the third highest rent property in the game. The second highest is Park Place at 1,500. So once you're at three houses, you probably don't need to build more unless you really have the money to. So I'd play that. This group I'd play a little more conservative on. I'd want to get at least two houses up on this group quickly if I could. Then I go a little more conservative when I have the money. I'll put that third house on Boardwalk. When I really have the money, I'll put that third house on Park Place. And I probably wouldn't go past four houses on Boardwalk unless I really had a lot of money or I really had to just go for broke. You can win with just this group, but this is probably one of the harder groups to because they just aren't landed on. And they cost a lot to build, so if you have these, you're going to want something else good with them. If you have the railroads with these, that would be very ideal, even three railroads, because three railroads are still going to get hit quite a bit going around the board. They get hit twice, it buys you a house. Every time you go on the board, you get $200 in rent. If you haven't hit nothing big, you can buy a house. You have to be patient with the greens and the blues. You can make an argument which is better. My argument between the dark blue, light blue, and green is it's game dependent. If the game has very little cash and few players in it, the light blue is going to be best of the three groups. The game has a lot of players, a lot of cash in it. It's going to be the dark green, not dark, they're just green. I don't want to say dark green. The dark blue, they can win you, but they're kind of a more of a wild card luck thing. But if you people are eventually going to land on Boardwalk, it's just the way the game is. So if you can hang in there, Boardwalk could start bankrupting people. People will eventually land on it, and if you play by the official rules, when someone goes bankrupt, you get their properties. That could help you get other groups, and then you can start building those up too. Um, Next, we're going to move on to the railroads. Um, Railroads are good money makers. Even one or two railroads will pay you 25% of their cost every time they're landed on. Not 25%, 12.5%, one of every 8 times, which is as good as Boardwalk. You want 3 or 4 railroads. You can't win the game on the railroads alone, but they're great cash generating properties. They're landed on more than any other group. Your opponent has about a 2/3 chance of landing on a railroad every time around the board. If you have all 4, that's $200, which means 2 out of 3 times you're going to get their goat money if you have all 4 railroads. Plus, you're not paying any money out on them, so that's why the railroads are good. You can really build up other properties with them. You can build a huge stack of cash. So you could give someone something even ridiculous to get a property that you need, even if it's a group that don't look that good. Even if it's a game with a lot of money in it, if you can get the light blue, at least it gives you another cash generator. Work your way that way. Railroads, you can't win with them alone, but they can certainly help you win in conjunction with other property groups. The thing with the railroads is they don't have a high payoff potential because you can't build on them, but they don't cost much. All 4 railroads are $800. Only thing that costs less would be both Browns or the utilities. Utilities are next. This is the property everybody seems to absolutely despise and act like is no good at all. I'm not going to say they're as good as having a full color group. I'm not delusional. But they do have, if you look at them as an individual property, which I know I didn't say I was going to get into that, but they have the best payoff. They have the best return on investment of individual properties, non-monopolized groups. One utility plays 4 times the roll of the dice. The average roll is a 7, so that'd be $28 rent if you own one. If you go around the board, the property that pays $28 is Pennsylvania Avenue, costs $320, more than twice as much. If you have both, it's $70 per hit, and that's as good. That's better than owning 2 railroads. It's actually as good as owning Park Place with unimproved with Boardwalk and the Monopoly. If you have Boardwalk and Park Place and no houses, Park Place only pays $70. So that tells you the potential. The potential's not there. They're not going to win you the game. They're not going to make you rich, but they do pay good money. They'll help pay for all the little small rents you hit going through the game. You can, if after they're hit a few times, you might have enough money to buy a house somewhere else. They'd be really good, I'd say, for helping to build, especially some of the lower groups. Let's say you get the utilities and say the purple group. It's early in the game. Utilities will give you a little bit of money to get building those houses. So the return on investment is the thing with utilities. They're not going to win you the game, but they bring in good money for what they cost, and the chances are someone will sell you the second utility if you have one and not charge that much, or you can usually get it thrown in on some deal. They're generally not going to ask for more than a couple $100 for it. So I'd say get the utilities, just use them to help, keep a cash flow coming in. If you own a monopoly and all mortgage properties and people are hitting that monopoly, you know how bad it is. You're just going to get nickeled and dimed around the board. These guys will help pay your lower rents for individual properties, pay when you go to jail and stuff like that. And if you can hang on to the money, they may help, off the offset cost, basically. And they pay better than even Boardwalk, which has the best return on investment of an individual property, is one out of every. It takes 8 times at Boardwalk to get your money back. These things take like 6 individually, 5 together. So they're useful for just, generating cash. Small amounts, but still, they don't cost anything either. They're $300 total. That's my video on how to best utilize the properties. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and have a great day.